Thank you very much. I'd now like to introduce the panel for this afternoon's interactive funding session. You'll see it coming up on the screen soon, and I'll introduce our speakers for this afternoon. You'll see there's a panel of 8 speakers here. We'll be bringing them up in 3 cohorts as we get through this afternoon's interactive funding session. So please let me welcome Mr. Mandla Mbuyazi from First Rand as part of our first cohort, Wendy Viljoen, EduInvest powered by Westgrow, and they'll be joined by Kamala Pillay, the CEO of Citizen Leader Lab. So if you can just take a seat, thank you very much. So we'll start with an opening question for each of our speakers and an opening address to you. And as I introduce each of our speakers, I'll just tell you a bit about them, and you'd understand their role in the ecosystem and the value chain that is CSI. I'd like to start with Mr. Mandla Mbuyazi. He's ideation and impact investing lead from First Rand. It's great to see that he's been with us as well for the 2 days. So we thank you very much, Mandla, despite speaking on the final panel today. Now, Mandla leads impact investment and ideation for the First Rand Foundation and the First Rand Empowerment Foundation. He's a finance professional with 19 years of experience in the financial services sector. And in his current role, he aligns financial returns with meaningful social and environmental impact, creating innovative investment strategies that drive sustainable change. So I think the perfect person for us to speak to First Rand's partnering and how it aligns with their financing as well. So Mr. Mandla, I'd like to invite you up. You're going to do your opening commentary from the podium.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's an honor to be here. Most partnerships don't fail because of lack of funding. They fail because capital and reality don't meet properly. The gaps are we fund from a distance, we measure from a distance, and we design from a distance. But impact doesn't happen at a distance. We need to design with proximity to reality. And before I continue, I'd like to pause and acknowledge something based on the last 2 days that we've had in the room. It's very obvious and felt when you are a funding partner in this type of conferences and one of the platinum sponsors that you've got a community of other funders, but it's not just funders, but you're also engaging with the large ecosystem of the developmental sector. So here it goes. So I've been a volunteer all my life, be it at church, be it in music, some of you may know, be it in the corporate career. That CEO accelerator, actually, before it, we used to run those type of programs at RMB. As much as I had the corporate work that I was doing, I was a coach in one of those programs. I had the privilege of coaching leaders and executives at RMB. And the circumstance that led to my role to make this to confess this about my current role, that my job found me. I did not look for it. I did not go looking for it. It found me. So I'm privileged. So I want to acknowledge everyone in this room who feels called to the work, whether you are a funder, nonprofit, intermediary, or any other player in the ecosystem. The immersive thinking that we do requires stepping into the ecosystem, into the system you are trying to change, not from the sidelines, not from the boardrooms, but to immerse yourselves directly, which actually means it costs money to do that. So I want to say this upfront that many of us here are here because we are led by purpose, we are led by something that is burning in our hearts. In my previous role, I worked in traditional capital. So when I think about capital today, I don't separate traditional grants from catalytic capital to impact investing, commercial capital into disconnected worlds. They work together. I see them as a part of one broader capital ecosystem, each with a different role to play. Because capital is not neutral, as well, as we've heard in the past 2 days. It behaves, it influences, and it directs. That's the problem, or a good thing about capital. And practically from our side as funders, partner selection is about trust, leadership, system around the work, potential to scale beyond us. We look for clarity of purpose, credibility of execution, and the ability to unlock something beyond our capital. We talk a lot about catalytic capital, but catalytic to what end? And the test is, when capital leaves, does the system continue? So not just to be there and be present as a funder, but when you leave, does the system continue? And I'll further dare to say, if the capital carries all the risk, I don't think it's catalytic, if it carries all the risk. Too many of our models are built on risk transfer and not risk sharing. And that's a problem. What typically happens is funders transfer risk to implementers. Implementers carry delivering pressure, and communities carry out outcomes. And yet we call this partnership. It's a contract. It's a tick size box. One that chases inputs and doesn't think deeply about outcomes. All hands must be on deck, is what I say. The intervention, how it's done, the problem, the solution, the outcomes must matter to all of us together. So as capital, we look at where are we going, how are we going, what are we doing, how will we know we are winning? It's clear, capital follows. And that's where the shift is, from funding activity to financing outcomes. That has been a journey for us as we've been doing a strategic refresh in the different foundations. Is let's stop funding for activity. Let's stop counting how much money is coming out of the pot, but let's actually chase outcomes and be clear and be crystal clear what those outcomes are. As a closing remark, I wanted to say, we've been talking about collaboration and trust over the past 2 days. I wanted to say that collaboration and trust are not soft concepts. They're not a soft concept. They are part of the capital strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mandla. I'd now like to welcome Wendy Fulyun. She's the Senior Manager who heads up EduInvest, powered by Wesgrow, which you've heard about over the past 2 days. Wendy, thank you very much. Wendy does have to leave us a bit earlier to get her flight back to the Western Cape. She took my joke about people from Cape Town bringing the bad weather. We were seeing in Johannesburg for the last 2 days, very personally, so she's decided to leave early. No, I'm joking. Wendy, thank you very much. You can either join us at the podium or...
Sure.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheldon. Yes, I took it personally, and looks like because I'm leaving, the sun is returning to Joburg. Good afternoon, everyone, and it's an honor to be representing EduInvest, powered by Wesgrow, this afternoon. I must tell you, I'm very inspired by the conversation and the dialogues that has been taking place over the past couple of days. And just to bring it back, EduInvest is a catalytic project that was established within Wesgrow about 2.5 years ago. And it was established in partnership with the Western Cape Education Department. And where this bright idea came from was at some stakeholder engagement where the Minister of Education for the province, Minister David Maynier, met with our CEO, and they literally had a conversation. Wesgrow is the official tourism, trade and investment promotion agency for the Western Cape. So basically, we do a lot of work to position the Western Cape as the province to invest in if you're considering South Africa. Sorry, Joburg. And so basically, we take the Western Cape to the world and we bring the world to the Western Cape. And we do, I must say this, a hell of a job to make sure that we are seen, we are presented, and we elevate the opportunities in the province. Now, back to that conversation. The minister was, if that is what you can do for the various different sectors for our province, I wonder what you can do for education if given the opportunity. And so the wheels turned. Now, EduInvest was then established to basically drive and unlock private sector investment in education. And this was built on a premise that education is not merely a social concern, but an economic imperative. And this can be many things, but it really positions education as a viable investment opportunity by making sure that we can facilitate investment into key areas within education, as well as mobilize CSI and philanthropy into the areas that's going to make the biggest, longest impact. Now, that being said, our core mandate is to facilitate investment, but we've also realized that there is a large gap where we need to position not just education for investment, but that we had to drive awareness around a shared accountability for education. And I mentioned that previously in a panel. And this means that we need to look at where are the areas of intersections. Now, our mandate is built on 3 pillars: investment facilitation, mobilization of CSI, as well as convening the sector. But it's underpinned by marketing and innovation activities that really changes the narrative of how we see education. Now, a lot has been said around investment here, and yes, I'm focusing on education, but we definitely need a vehicle where the ecosystem can be mobilized. And that's the role that EduInvest has played over the past 2.5 years. And I often ask myself, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? And that is the driving force behind the work that we're doing. And when we talk about connecting with like-minded individuals, fostering partnerships, we are definitely looking for those that are seeing education as a long game and that's willing to do the hard work that it requires, both from a funding point of view and implementation, a good governance, promotion, everything in between. Now, this probably gets back to that African saying, you know, you want to plant seeds so that we don't get to enjoy the shade that that tree produces, but it is 4 generations to come, and education is that. And for anyone that has worked in education or thinking of investing in education, be aware it's not an easy sector to work in, but the rewards are great. And we are willing to work with anyone that appreciates that it will take a lot of elbow grease, but it will be definitely worth it. And if education is elevated, this country will be elevated. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wendy. I'd now like to call up Kamala Pillay, someone that many of you in the room will have known and worked with in the past. She's the CEO of Citizen Leader Lab. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheldon. It looks like our process is the podium. So,
Yeah.
so we'll follow the process.
We're flexible, very flexible here. Flexible funding.
So firstly, it's really an honor and privilege to be with all of you today. Thank you to the Trialogue team for creating this opportunity, this platform for conversation. Now, when you give an NGO an opportunity to talk fundraising, that's quite dangerous. But I'll try and behave. And I did look at the brief, Sheldon, thank you for that. So the question is, what is our experience with fundraising? So as an organization, we've been around 16 years, so we've seen some things. In preparing for this 5 minutes, I had a look at who's funded us over the 16 years, and actually quite interested to see it was close to 200 businesses and corporates that funded us over this time. And all different relationships. 200 organizations is a lot, so you can imagine the nature of relationships are different. For some of them quite short-term. rather transactional, maybe a year or two. Others long-term, developing really meaningful partnerships based on a lot of trust. And that's what we strive for. That's what I think all NGOs would love to have, long-term relationships built on trust. And these relationships have lasted more than 10 years. The interesting thing when looking at this is just the recognition that all these relationships take a massive amount of effort to create, to nurture, to sustain. And I think anyone who's in the NGO space knows that it's one of the delicate balances we have to walk as NGO leaders. How much time do we spend on fundraising? How much time do we spend evaluating our work, looking at our impact, optimizing, innovating, scaling our solutions? I'm going to come back to that, but I wanted to also just reflect on how we've approached fundraising. And of course, 200 organizations, they're not all in the room today. So every business that you approach is in a different stage of their evolution in terms of philanthropy. And that's useful to keep in mind. Our approach when we go to business, and this is not necessarily the approach to take, it's just what has brought us success. Our approach has been looking for mutual value creation. So what do I mean by that? Of course, we exist to serve communities. That is our reason for being. Specifically for Citizen Leader Lab, we exist to serve leaders. But we have found that you can serve the community and do that responsibly and effectively and also create value for your funding partner. And the nature of value, that ranges. There's actually quite a lot of things that we as NGOs can look at to add additional value to our partners. But just to name a few, I think just the basic, being professional and having good governance, helping your partner easily meet their scorecard requirements. Volunteerism, we were reminded again just a few minutes ago. We all understand the benefits for a company of volunteerism. It boosts morale, it boosts team spirit and cohesiveness, it improves long-term employee retention. That's something that just about every NGO can actually offer in a responsible way to their business partners, their funders. An interesting one that I've come across is community engagement. And the nature of our work is such that we do enable for deeper relationships to form between business and communities. And this has been quite interesting to see the result, the outcome of it, and the value creation for business. I've had more than one business come to me and say, I now understand the community better. Why is that important? Well, the community is also their customer. They're developing services and products for the community. So understanding them is really important, and that impacts the bottom line. My time's quickly running out. I did want, in closing, just to come back to this balancing act that we have to play. Fundraising is a time-consuming activity. And we need to balance that against actually doing the work. And I would like to take this opportunity to ask for some help from funders. This is not asking too much. You can help us manage our time better just by considering one thing that I think is not too big, and that's communication. How do you communicate with the NGOs that approach you? The things that would make our lives a lot easier is understanding what you fund, why you fund, where you fund it, understanding how much you're looking to invest, understanding your internal process and your timelines, knowing we need to know when we're going to hear a yes or a no. And so importantly, give us the no. If it's a no, it's not what we want to hear, but if it's a no, tell us. That is much more effective for us to know so that we can close that chapter and move on. And give us feedback with that no. We're here to learn, to grow. The social challenge that we have is massive. If we're not learning from each other, we're not growing. So that's me. Thank you.
Kamala, thank you for that. And I think on that note, I mean, if we're not learning from each other, we're not growing. And that's exactly why we have the conference, number one, but from this session as well, and just to touch on the non-profits that we have, we've got ones like Kamala, Citizen Leader Lab with around 200, and then we've got more medium-sized, and then down to smaller. So that we get the experience from all levels of organizations in terms of what works for them and lessons that we've learned and what possibly hasn't worked in the past. Wendy, I want to start with you. You're in a unique position at Westgrow where you're not just only as talking to nonprofits, but you're talking to the corporates as well. So pretend you're talking to the corporates in the room. What is how can they partner with you? You've spoken about catalytic capital. Is it only in the catalytic capital when we're talking funding perspective, or how are there other ways that corporates can interact with you on your EduInvest?
Thanks for that, Sheldon. I think what I've realized is that there's not one size fit all approach. I think we can all agree. So not just catalytic capital, all forms of funding mechanisms we look at. And we start all the way back to the beginning. We look at what your corporate strategy is. We position, of course, education for that. We walk a mile with the corporates that we work with. And that's very important because we might not find something to collaborate on immediately, but we are building or working together for a longer term goal. And so EduInvest plays a facilitation part in that regard. Now, on the flip side, how we work with nonprofits and organizations, we see them as implementation partners. And so part of the facilitation role we play is to connect businesses with strategy in hand, with budgets cleared, clear vision, direction of what they want to achieve, and connect them with investment-ready partners, which is your NPOs. So we kind of the nexus between the opportunity or the intervention and the capital that is required to make it a reality. And so when we are engaging with large corporates, we're not asking for anything. We're really just evaluating where they are at and how that can be stitched into priority areas within our province and deliver long-term goals. And an example of that is we worked with a corporate that I got to connect right here in Johannesburg. And they then went on to commit 10 years of supporting 50 schools within the Western Cape, replicating what they are doing in Gauteng. And all it takes is to understand what does this corporate actually want to achieve at the end of the day. And once you understand that, then we can work around that. And from an implementation partner point of view, we then looked at, okay, what does the Western Cape then offer this corporate? What things do we still need to put in place in order to make this happen? And how do we move this along? It has been just over 12 months of working together, and we're finally going to launch that intervention in the Western Cape. So again, it's a longer game. We're willing to do the work if we understand what corporates want and what NPOs want to achieve with a willing partner.
Okay. I'd like to just turn your attention and launch a poll before I come to Kamala next. It's our first poll for the session. In your experience, how often do corporate non-profit partnerships achieve the impact both parties originally intended? So it'll be good to get your thoughts on that as well. As those come through, and we'll start sharing those. Thank you to the team. As you can see, and I'll be honest with you, I voted for sometimes, but not consistently. Seems to be most of us think the same. And I think that's the reality of where we are, right? And why we want to learn and improve, and that continuous improvement that we talk about. Kamala, I want to come to you. You know, the number 200 sounds impressive. And it is impressive. And well done to you and your team and the reputation and the work that you've built over time. But if you were even to get close to that, to 50, to 100, how do you manage those relationships? You mentioned transactional, and some of them would be transactional, but I imagine many of them would be building into longer-term partnerships. And how do you manage those?
So just to clarify, Sheldon, it's 200 over 16 years. So it's not 200 right now.
Yeah.
And absolutely, we did find that to be a challenge. You can't have a lot of deep partnerships with lots of funders. So our strategy of late has been to focus on the partners who we think are aligned in our vision. You know, what they want to achieve is similar to what we want to achieve, and then invest that time and effort into building that relationship. You can't be everything to everyone. It's not possible.
Okay. Mandla, when we talk about values and alignment, right? And I think for us at Trilog, we've got strategic CSI, which is, you know, your ultimate level you'd want to work towards. And that's very much about what the business, strategic focus of the business is. And then you'd obviously go and look for partners who align to that. How do you determine that? I mean, is there a scorecard where you can determine value alignment with partners?
When it comes to value alignment for us, I think before we reach scorecard, what was important to us, I think I wanted to take your previous question that relates to the number of partners that we play with. I think we have been transitioning from moving from a strategy that seeks to engage more, to be all things to men in terms of how much we disperse funding. But now we've gone to a point where we are saying, look, instead of scaling wide, we want to scale a little bit deep. We want to focus on fewer partners. We want to focus on capital, and we want to focus on what that capital delivers. And then the partners that we work with is a level of trust that we measure. How long they've been playing on the space is important, and then also the relationships that they have around the community is also matter. And some of the projects that we fund, they do not take overnight to deliver. Sometimes there's a co-creation element, so we need to be engaging with partners that are able to co-create with us and think with us. So as a funder, you come into the space, the first thing is not just to, for us, it's no longer just to let go of the funding of the money, but it's also important that the outcome is delivered that we're looking for. So that journey is important. I mean, of late, we just we're gratefully part of the launch of the nature bond on the JSE, the first of its kind in the continent, as an outcomes funder. We played a catalytic role, being the first ones to put money into the space and invite other outcomes funders to play with us in the space. And there was a whole lot of things to engage there, to balance from different interests to the interest of what we're all trying to achieve on the ground. But what's important, I want to say, is that it took 18 months to deliver. It can take that long. Okay. And what's important is, at the end of the day, are we meeting the outcome that you're trying to chase for? Or are we going towards the outcome we're trying to chase for?
You talk about 18 months, and you talk about, at the end of the day, do we achieve the outcome that we've set out to do? Kamal, I want to come to you in terms of the window period. 18 months. I think from your perspective as a corporate mate, you mentioned it took 18 months, almost with the underlying message being that it took long.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That type of view, and I think luckily we're not in America where we used to, quarterly earnings updates and thinking in quarters. But Kamala, what does it do for you and your organization when the time horizons from organizations and corporates may be a lot shorter than the type of time horizons you have in mind to have real impact, and not just outcomes, but to have impact?
So it's an interesting thing, Sheldon. So I've come out of a business environment, so I completely understand the timelines, the cycle, performance measurement cycles. There was a comment yesterday about being able to speak business, and I think as an organization, we're fortunate we have that. I think we need to help business to speak social development. That's a process, it's a learning, and it's possible when you have partnerships. And the word partnerships gets used a lot. But if you look at it really deeply, partners are two or more entities that are all bringing value. And their value is all recognized. So we partner with communities. We partner with funders. And we recognize the value of each one. And we need to help other people see that. I think it's easy to get frustrated because the funder does often set the agenda and the criteria. So it's easy to get frustrated. But it's our responsibility and our opportunity, because we are close to the ground, to help inform so that the funder can adapt. Whether or not we'll get the 10-year plan or the 15-year plan, I don't know, Sheldon, but we need to keep motivating for it as a sector.
Wendy, Kamala, before I get, Mandla, you indicated, and I'll get to my question for Wendy. You can go ahead.
No, what I wanted just to add, back to the example, is that part of why it took 18 months is because of the number of people that sit on the table. Okay. It was just not 3 parties on the table. It was plenty of parties on the table. And we're engaging, it was a bond, right? You've got senior investors who've got a very specific intent of what they're trying to do with their money. You've got outcomes funders that also have a very specific intent of what they're doing with the money. You've got the implementation partner that invites all of us to go and see on the ground what is happening and the impact it will make on the community. So sometimes, sometimes certain things get ticked off in terms of the actual relationship on the ground and what you see, the impact that it's going to make. But to get everybody on the table, on a round table, that's the issue, partly as well. You're engaging on the round table to reach consensus on direction. That takes its time. And I think for me, we need to be adaptable, especially on big type of initiatives that we're trying to achieve. That requires us to set proof points that will allow a momentum to build later.
I think, and I suppose, the importance you mentioned there, and I think we sometimes break it down into corporate,
yes,
non-profit, government, and we think of those 3 pillars, but actually community, and we've seen it with some of the panels in terms of the beneficiary voice, right? And I think what you mentioned, around stakeholder engagement is often more complex than we think in terms of those 3 pillars. Wendy, I want to come to you and for your final word before we let you go. Kamala mentions community, which I think is really important and maybe something for us to think about in composing the panels where we've got corporate, non-profit, right, is that community voice. How does West grow? So obviously you're interacting with the corporate, you're interacting with the non-profits or the implementers or some of the social enterprises that you work with. Being quasi-government, how do you interact with the community to ensure that the solutions in terms of schooling and structure and curriculum and all of those things in terms of how the schools are set up, especially where it's being targeted at poorer communities where you want low-fee schools at a high level of education, how do you ensure that the community voice keeps coming in terms of the solutions, that they're not forgotten when we're talking catalytic capital, innovative school devices and things like that, which can often be at a high level?
I think back to what you just said, and I made a note of this, is that informed decision-making. As EduInvest and as Westgrow, we don't know everything about the sector. Even the department, they're custodians of school scholars and teachers, but they don't know everything about the sector. And so we are driven to be on the ground. I get a lot of people that know me or know of me, knows that I'm always somewhere running around, and it's for that very reason. We make sure that we've got proper community engagement for project that impacts the community, number one. And that's where we start. We make sure that whoever is providing interventions into that community is connected to that community. And if we're talking about schools, we have amazing opportunities, for example, in the West Coast, all the way up to Vredendal. If you know the Western Cape, you know it's far up, 4-hour drive from city center. But what has been so amazing about that trip is once again reinforcing the importance of having the beneficiary at the center of that decision making. And that value cannot be understated. The fact that we had community leaders as part of the conceptualization of what is going to improve learning and education in that communities was vital. That we had the funders, the MPO, the schools, the WCD, everyone involved so that we can produce something that is unique to the learners that need quality education in that area. And so, yes, we work across the entire education ecosystem. So that is early childhood development, schools and post-schools, from universities all the way to technical vocational training and edtech and everything else in between. But that still means that we have to make sure that we are grassroots focused while we're doing broad sector strategy and implementation. So those two normally creates this chasm, this gap of nothingness. And my role, and through the role of EduInvest, we're really trying to narrow that gap between the on the ground and where decision is being made.
Wendy, thank you very much. That brings us to the last word on our first cohort. Thank you very much to Mandla Mbuyazi from First Rand, Wendy Fuldun from EduInvest Westgrow, and Kamala Pillay from Citizen Leader Lab. I'd now like to invite, in fact, let's give them a round of applause first. Thank you very much for your time. Now I'm going to invite our second cohort up. But before I forget, she's always the one asking us to clap for everyone else. But please, can we clap for Nozipho Chabalala, who is an amazing MC, and I think you all agree on that, and hopefully she'll see this online. Even when she was slightly choking because of a lack of water up here, she kept things going. So thank you very much, Nozi, in your absence, and it was great to have her back for a third year for the Trilog Business and Society Conference. I'd now like to invite up our second cohort of panelists, Mr. Lunga Skuman from the Development Bank of Southern Africa. Lunga, you're already a hit. You haven't even said a word. No, but it was a really great panel this morning, led by in partnership with the DBSA. So thank you very much, Lunga and the team there for partnering with us this year. I'd also like to invite up Mr. Eric Mlambo, Footprints Foundation Chairman, Founder, who is with us here. Eric and I realized that our paths crossed many years ago across different sectors, and now we're both in the development space, so that was great to connect with. Eric and Lunga, thank you very much for being with us over the past 2 days as well. It was really great to have you with us here. And then I'd like to invite up as our final panelist on this cohort, Zintle Razia from ABSA. Thank you, Zintle. She's the Senior Manager for Corporate Citizenship Programs. I'd like to welcome them up, and thank you very much. We're now going to start with the opening commentaries. You get the flow of the session here. I would like to remind you that you can pose your questions on the chat. I will draw from them. I see the chat is going, so you are commenting and engaging. But if you've got any questions, this is your time to ask them as well. So thank you very much to our panelists there. I'd now like to invite Lunga. You can either do it from the podium or sit wherever you're most comfortable with. Lunga currently serves as the Corporate Social Investment Program Lead at the DBSA, the Development Bank of Southern Africa. You'll also see their stand outside with our exhibition stands for our sponsors. Please do engage with them. He's working at the intersection of development finance, social investment, and systems change, with over a decade of experience across corporate, philanthropic, and non-profit environments. He has led CSI stakeholder relations and sustainability portfolios at several listed companies, including Sanlam and the ShopRite Group. So someone who truly is experienced across the sector, and it's a pleasure to hear from you, Lunga.
Thank you. Good afternoon, colleagues. I can't seem to beat the Vodacom intro of greetings on the data bundles bit. I thought about it. Do I say greetings from our hard hats and TLPs? I'm not sure. But good afternoon, and we really appreciate the opportunity for us to speak and share some of our thoughts in the space. In 2024, the DBSA rethinked or reevaluated its approach in terms of CSI. And in our approach, we took a pivotal shift. And we began moving away from grant making in once-off donations and disconnected projects, and framed our work as creating a developmental impact platform. By that, we meant that we are happy to frame ideas and fund them and back them, and for the sector to take and run with. We are happy to invest in the underdogs, the unusual ideas, in the unusual organizations, not the usual guys. And we're happy to partner with unlikely partners. And over the last 2 years, we've been able to show some tangible, quite strong results in that particular work that we've done. For example, as I said, our posture then obviously had to change. So we fund more the strength of the idea, not the strength of the proposal. We are able to accept proposals in any language. And also we're able to back the potential of an idea and the people behind it. We also ask the fundamental question: how far can this project go? Is it just a program? Can it drive systemic change? And can we leverage partnerships in the same time? We also aim to be quite fair also in terms of how we fund. It takes money, it takes costs to run non-profit organizations, and therefore part of the posture that we had to adopt is to be fair to non-profits. Fair in terms of what we expect from them, and fair in terms of how we pay them, in terms of how they deliver the work. We became very friendly to unlikely partners as well. For example, we've ran a number of projects with ShopRite, which is a food retailer combining their work with development finance institutions like ourselves, Helion, GSK, and many others. And we knew that for us to drive developmental impact, it will take unlikely partners and the unusual suspects to come on board. And so some of the ideas that we started working on and are building up is, for example, the infrastructure fund, which we spoke to earlier, where the DBSA is using its capability in infrastructure development and its track record to raise funds for ECD infrastructure at scale. We know that this idea cannot just live with us, it can have multiple partners as well. Another example, as I said, is a project we ran with Breadline Africa, where we were one of the first people to put the spotlight with them on the issue of pit toilets. And since then, that project has gotten more funding beyond the DBSA. Another one that we are trying at the moment is a project which combines all of our CSI partners in a single geographical area. And we're saying to them, could you do something together? Not compete with each other, do something together. You know our strategy, and could we use this as a model for the sector to learn from? So we are happy as a DBSA, and we believe in building Africa's prosperity, but it will take an unusual posture to change the problems that we face today. And the DBSA, we are willing to bet in Africa's prosperity through CSI. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lunga, and I really like that comment, strength of the idea, because we know that there are people who produce beautiful presentations, beautiful pitches, and not that the ideas aren't good, but how many ideas are being lost in the way through language barriers, and an inability to present something such as a PowerPoint pitch or a deck. I would certainly fail if that was the case. I'd now like to invite Zintle Razia, from ABSA. She's the Senior Manager of Corporate Citizenship Programs. Zintle, you're also a hit. I can see some clapping already in the audience. Now, Zintle is a Youth Development and Entrepreneurship Program VP with over a decade of experience supporting young people to access skills, economic opportunities, and pathways to sustainable livelihoods. We heard that coming through quite strongly in ABSA's panel yesterday, which was around pathways to economic opportunities for our youth. Zintle, over to you for your opening.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sheldon, and good afternoon, everyone. I think all protocol observed, so this is why I'm walking up to the podium. As you would have heard yesterday in the panel discussion with ABSA, one of the key areas that we look for in partnerships is working with implementation partners that we can co-create with. I think it's also quite important to acknowledge all the different partners and implementation partners in the room today. And as part of our strategy, which is financial inclusion through entrepreneurship, we've taken a stance to co-create solutions with our partners. And we believe that as ABSA in driving economic activity for young people, we can't go on this journey alone, which is why we work with credible partners to help us deliver on our mandate. As a result of this, we've had to look at the next level. And what is the next level? It's reimagining partnerships together with the partners that help us deliver on our work. So this requires learning together. Part of co-creation in coming up with solutions is understanding where our partners work, the demographic reach that they have, and how we can come up with solutions to help us reach our mandate and objectives. So part of what we've done in driving our strategy is really moving from transactional partnerships to relational partnerships. And this means how do we harness strengths of the implementation partners that we work with by understanding the values that each partner brings together and coming together to share understanding of the problem, but also not looking at off-the-shelf solutions in how we implement our interventions. It's about making sure that our partners have the credibility, we learn from each other, from the challenges that are happening on the ground, and come up with solutions, as Mandlandla had mentioned yesterday, around the ecosystem lens and ecosystem approach. I think what we also wanted to learn today is how we partner with organizations. And this is through two approaches. The first approach is unsolicited, partnerships where partners come to us directly, to say these are the programs that we are working on, as well as solicited partnership engagements where we are quite clear that in aligning to our strategy, the partners that we work with must deliver on program relevance, must be able to show M&E capability and delivery footprint important. And as part of the learning journey, in the partnerships that we drive, is we had to take a stance and understand from an M&E perspective, we would ordinarily, look at M&E towards the end of an intervention or the end of a program. We've now reshifted our thinking to say, how do we bring our M&E team at the start of the journey? And it's very important to ensure that as we work with our partners, they too understand the outcomes that we are wanting to drive. As Mandlandla mentioned yesterday, I think what's quite important for us is understanding the beneficiary voice. Lerato said that how does she as a beneficiary of our entrepreneurship programs move from saying I blew it to I grew it? And this is the mandate that we are hoping to drive in driving and creating young people who are economically thriving. And as a result of this, I think for us, what's also become quite important is that we believe that impact without accountability doesn't work. And the reason why we say impact without accountability doesn't work is that, for instance, if we've set a mandate to say the target is reaching 100 young people in Uno, and I think I need to use the click, as Nozipo said yesterday, and you can't show us where those young people have transitioned to, then it's a problem. So the M&E component has become very critical in how we drive impact, how we co-create solutions with our partners. And I think what's also important to understand is that as the custodians who have the mandate to drive social impact, we are responsible and accountable to our principals to report back on where the funding has gone, has it transpired into the delivered outcomes that we were hoping to achieve, and has the young person in Equnu been able to receive the level of impact that we are hoping to drive. And I think with this, I just want to leave and say that the ecosystem lens and the ecosystem approach is very important in how we drive our mandate of ensuring that we are delivering and driving and building young people who are economically thriving.
Thank you very much for that, Zintle. I'm glad you brought in the M&E part, because I think it's an important part of the partnerships which we maybe haven't touched on as yet. I'd like to now introduce Eric Mlambo. He's the CEO of Footprints Foundation, a non-profit which aims to empower disadvantaged youth with a special focus on marginalized girls in our society. Now, the foundation has a national footprint and implements programs across gender equality, youth empowerment, cultural awareness, and child safety. And why I mention the cultural awareness, you'll know from the Trilogue handbook every year, we profile the various different sectors and funding that goes into it. And arts, culture, sport, we know we're a sports mad country, we're a very gifted arts and culture country, but often, much of the funding, as we know, goes into other areas where there may be a more pressing need, but, are parts of our country that we shouldn't forget. Those culture, arts and arts and culture and sport sector as well. So now I'd like to introduce Eric, whose non-profit, I think, based on its profile, punches far beyond its weight.
Thanks, Sheldon. So I think the 5 minutes to me sounds like 5 hours, because the opportunity and the audience here is people that you would like to send proposals to. And I think you're all here. So let me speak on behalf of the NPOs that are out there that sometimes may not be given this chance. I wasn't sure that I would be given the mic after leaving it 16 years ago to come to this space, but today, yeah, I'm holding one. Footprints Foundation has been in the space for the last 16 years, and I think today it's an honor for me to be given this opportunity to speak about a bit of our work. One of the things that I've had being spoken today for maybe the last 2 days has been co-creation. And with us, one of the things that we did in the beginning, we had a partnership with one of the corporates. And the program that we were implementing in schools, we saw an opportunity that we could bring in more partners. And we asked them if they could give us an opportunity to establish a buy model in which we'll invite more corporates. It took us 2.5 years. And the reason is because the corporate wanted to own the name of the program. By the time they realized that what we were proposing, which was a new innovation, one, will extend their reach. Two, they were going to benefit because their product was going to be bought by other corporates that will then support the program. So I'm saying this because we're speaking about innovation. Innovation will come from us as the NPOs, and the space that you as the funders is, we know that you've got the mandate to deliver, to measure, and all of those things. But what if you were to take a chance and co-create with us with the innovation that we bring into the table? But well, at the same time, I've heard today that you guys have got set mandates that you need to make sure that we follow. Our mandate is to make sure that what we have identified as a gap in the communities, we try and resolve. And that gives us maybe an advantage to innovate. So one of the things that we've recently done is to introduce a program called Walk Her Story. Now, Walk Her Story would come maybe from an opportunity where we're seeing that there are a lot of victims of gender-based violence. When you think about it, If I'm a victim, I'm expected to go and sit at the corner, and I'm profiled as a victim. But what happens to my livelihood, my life, my family, and everyone that is around me? And for us, we have created a platform through a website in which this website is double-sided. We want to create and put the stories that will be for the media so that they can access the stories and be able to show society what we are doing behind our closed doors. On the other side is to be able to profile some of these who are victims and give them an opportunity to be witnesses as opposed to being victims. And with the lady that we found in Mpumalanga, in Middelburg, one of the things that we saw just in a week's time, she was able to connect with corporates that have invested in her to transform her life from someone that was hiding to be able now to transform her life. So one of the things is, are you going to open up those spaces for those corporates that come with ideas that are not sitting in your strategic plans, but ideas that maybe are rooted within the communities? And with that, I would like to thank you.
Eric, thank you very much for that. And let's turn to the discussion. Just a reminder, you can send through your questions through the Q&A function. Lillian, thank you very much. I know your question is more phrased as a comment, but I get the ethos of it, and I certainly will pose it to our panelists. Warren, thank you very much for just submitting yours. Lunga, I want to start with you, where you said something very interesting, about considering the idea, not the proposal. And I think you touched on something that is often overlooked in the nature of our country. If I look at the NPO sector, if I look at the people who are often the creators of the organizations, it comes from within the community, because you've identified a problem, you've identified a need. We see it with ECDs, right? So you're not going to get, in many instances, a polished pitch, either from its presentation or the language that is written. So I think what you said was really powerful in terms of an idea. How do you go about interrogating that idea to get to the point from submission to where you've now, said, okay, we're going to back the idea? How does that process work?
Thank you. I think as my colleague spoke earlier, we have frameworks in terms of our focus areas. I mean, that's step number one. From a DBSA point of view, you've got three focus areas. ECD is one, access to opportunity is the second one, and then community support. So obviously one has to look at it in those lenses. But beyond that, one is to look at it in terms of what other picture is this idea aiming to paint. And what it will take is not to reject it at face value, but to make time with the nonprofit, to take time with the sender to engage with them. And as I said earlier, one of the ways that we do it, we allow people to send us proposals through various channels, our website, via emails, in whichever language, but also we do also encourage people to leave us voicemails. A lot of times there are people, grassroots organizations, who cannot access computers to send us tangible proposals. Therefore, we encourage them to leave us a voice message so that they can tell their own story. I think what will allow us to look at ideas that are brand new in the space is if we also dismantle the systems that we've created which exclude many people. And allow for unusual ways for us to receive feedback and receive requests from various people who talk to us. And also for a CSI practitioner to go out and see the project. There's only so much that you can see and visualize from just reading, but there's something powerful that happens when you go into community and ask the question of not what I can do for you, but to understand why this particular person has decided to do that particular work. And so that's the approach that we take from the DBSA side.
And what I take away from that, and I think to link it to Moki Makura's Tri-Talk yesterday, is the power of narrative, right? And narrative is not just a movie, whatever, but narrative is going into a community, hearing someone's story, being able to engage with someone's idea, see the seeds of it there and say, okay, well, what's the story behind it? So I think that really is powerful and really commendable of looking at how people able to connect with you, on a practical level. Zintle, from the, you mentioned M&E, right? And it's a necessary and very important step in measuring impact, right? To be able to say what's working, what's not working. Where should we be going? Where are we having the biggest impact? One of the things that again, grassroots level, organizations, one of the things that NPOs often note that possibly trips them up in the process may be, how do we document what we're doing so that we're able to show impact, and it's not just a governance matter. How does APSA support its implementing partners so that the monitoring frameworks as such are aligned right from the beginning?
Thank you for that question, Sheldon. I think it's a good one. So how we do it, as I mentioned, is that we've been on a journey, and even from a monitoring and evaluation perspective, understanding different partners are at different stages of the M&E progress. And so what we've done is, from a support perspective, is integrating M&E right at the start of the program. So as we engage with our partners, we try to be very clear on the goals up front. And I think you raise a valid question as well, and we've seen this as well. We've got some partners who have advanced M&E frameworks, and we have some partners where we are walking the journey with them on their M&E and impact measurements. And so how we have approached it is by making sure that from a review perspective, because we are accountable and we have to meet our governance principles, is ensuring that, number one, in some instances we do pre-site visits before we go table a proposal with a review committee. Number two, it's quarterly reviews, quarterly insights. And I think what's also quite important is the feedback loop. And part of it is by listening to our partners in terms of what is happening and what's transpiring on the ground within the grassroots levels. But number two, how do we support them with some of the mechanisms that we have from our M&E team to help drive that impact and help realize the impact by supporting them? I think to close off, just reflecting on the question as well, is that we've been quite intentional in ensuring that as part of the M&E framework, how are we also not only measuring on outputs and activities, but the outcomes, getting to hear the stories of the beneficiaries, seeing whether the impact has really been delivered and derived. And through the collaboration and co-creation, even from an M&E perspective, we've started to shift the dial in terms of, number one, supporting partners, number two, being clear on the goals up front, and number three, being able to provide our partners with different templates and frameworks on how we are expecting them to report. And in instances where the M&E is quite advanced, we then make sure that the desired outcomes of the initiatives that we're driving are being met.
Okay, thanks for that. And it really does speak to beyond just fundraising, that partnership does roll into how do we design M&E, what sort of metrics are we looking at, how can we help you along that journey as well. Now I want to turn to Lillian Masebenza's comment, right, which I get as I'd mentioned, I get the ethos of what she's saying, and it goes to funding of an ecosystem or funding of an organization beyond just a program, which we know was the MTN panel at the end of yesterday. And Eric, I'm going to start with you, to speak from an NPO's perspective, and what you've done is take up the mic for not just your own organization, but all NPOs. Now, we know that there are head office costs, right, in running any organization. Head office costs that you just can't get away from. But a lot of funding goes into programmatic funding, right? And there are often hidden costs that a organization incurs that goes beyond what is possibly put into the pitch or how much it is to run the program. What would your message be to corporates or to funders in terms of how to think about funding, if it's not an ecosystem, right, because that's very big, but in terms of funding an organization and how an organization works? Eric?
I think yesterday there was the word that was used, the soul. Someone brought it here. So if we were to venture into looking at NPOs as partners, the first question at a personal level, if you're a CSI manager or head of corporate, you would have to ask yourself, how do they survive? Because if you look at them as a partner, you automatically know that you are earning an income. And the word that also today came was, we call NPOs implementing partners. But when you come with the budget, you say 90% must go to the beneficiaries or how you want it. And if the 10% is then for delivery, then it means that you've completely excluded the human factor in there, which is quite common. We speak of mental health, we speak of NPO leaders as people that have families, have children. I would say that most of the people that you interact with, their kids go to schools where you pay proper money for a school fees. And we all are aware that South Africa's education is a challenge. But I'm expected that I must give back to society and help solve a problem. But my child cannot access the same spaces because you are going to question the same line item that says I need to earn an income. And I think that's one of the most challenging things. The other thing is you will then speak on behalf of the company to say, we will not fund that. We expect you to go and find it somewhere. But you are not going to link me with an entity or an organization that will cover that. She's speaking about M&E. Why don't you just come with that support for M&E and pay for it and plug it into the NPO so that it helps the NPO to protect or deliver, but at the same time make sure that if I said I'm paying myself 5,000, that's what I am getting. And I think if I go to the word the soul is, at the end of the day, if we are human beings, when you do the budget, you will ask how many people does it take to deliver the program. Why don't you budget the same way you would budget for your internal staff members? Because at the end of the day, the impact, you claim it as yours, but you've completely neglected the delivery.
Okay.
Thank you very much for that, Eric. And just, we've got about 3 minutes left, and I want to come to both Zintle and Lunga. In terms of Lunga, you spoke about the development of the DBSA CSI strategy over time, and being very intentional about that. How have you factored in that development the overall support of your partners, the type of support Eric alludes to or mentions in his answer?
Yeah, I think for my sins, and I fully agree with Eric 100%. For my sins, I also worked in the NGO sector. So now that I'm in charge of the purse strings,
yes,
I understand what it actually takes to deliver the work. And I think we need to be fair. And I think I said earlier, we need to be fair in terms of how we fund nonprofits, but also how we treat nonprofits. We cannot expect nonprofits to fund their own operational costs, but deliver our own work. And we claim the pictures and put it in our annual reports. We have to be a little bit fair and be very conscious of what that does to the sector. So from our side, for example, we extrapolate or remove certain costs from the NPO. Whether it's the cost of doing videography, we don't expect them to do it. We have a specific line item on top of the existing budget for them to do that. In some cases where nonprofits have had surplus in terms of funds, we don't ask for them back. We say, go take out the team for a team building, go and do training and so forth. We are as interested in the impact and the story as the people behind the actual work. And that's how we're building Africa's prosperity, by making sure that we are supporting and fully intentional about how we support nonprofits.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Zintle, I'm going to give you the final word. APSA's, one of the CSI leaders in terms of South Africa's large corporates. You've got a very mature, well thought out, strategic CSI operation, and you can see it in the way you've partnered with a number of organizations, not just NPOs. In terms of that support that we talk about, how have you found that's developed over the years from not just, the funding support, the monitoring and evaluation support, but throughout the value chain of the program? How has that support developed over the years? Eric mentioned something as important as mental wealth and health and well-being for some of these organizations.
And I just want to also jump off what Eric said. And when we say that we partner with M&E from the start, it's exactly that. So we do support by providing M&E support to the organizations that we work with. And this is part of the way that, from a capacity building perspective, we provide that level of support so that our partners can leverage off the systems that we've also built. Broadly from a support perspective, and I want to go back to what was shared yesterday, and it's really around taking this ecosystem lens and ecosystem approach, which then directly links back into co-creation. So when we partner with organizations, we take it seriously, and as he mentioned, you said we refer to implementation partners, and we believe that partnerships are key to help us deliver our work. So part of the support, number one, there's the M&E component. Number two, we believe that we need to be able to hear the voices of the young people. So we profile beneficiaries across our platforms. Number two, it's also about how do we bring business alongside us in terms of how we implement our interventions. So there is cross-collaboration across different functions and areas within the business where we can expose our partners, expose our beneficiaries. For instance, with the enterprise development team, where we sometimes see that we've reached our mandate from a corporate citizenship perspective, how do we then transition, whether it's our partners or our beneficiaries, into the broader ecosystem lens from an ABSA perspective? So ecosystem thinking, ecosystem building is quite important. And I think to close off as well, one of the friction points that we've seen is that oftentimes, organizations come to us and say, single year funding doesn't work. We heard Zimkita speak about that yesterday as well. And we acknowledge that. And part of the broader support is to say, how do we start to shift from single year support mechanisms to multi-year programs that we're running, and we've started to do that. So for us, being evidence-based is quite important, and being evidence-based means that we are listening to our partners and trying to implement and being agile in our approach and delivering our mandate. But it's not only about our mandate, it's about the young person that we are wanting to drive to be economically active and really change the trajectory of within this country, which is making sure that young people have the opportunities that they need to be able to drive impact within their community. So that's the broader lens that we look at.
You must be a mind reader, because Janine McAvoy, and thank you for your question. Janine's question in a nutshell is around, the shift to multi-year unrestricted funding. And to your point where you're saying, look, the thinking is changing around that. You're listening to your partners to say, well, this may not work in certain instances. How do we change that? I'd like to thank my panelists for this cohort. Please give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Lunga, Zintle, and Eric for a really insightful session there. I'd now like to call up our final two panelists, Lesimola Selepes, Senior Manager, Education, Youth and Women's Programs at MTN, and Cara Jean Peterson. There we go. She's the CEO at the Phoenix Trust. Thank you very much for having you both on the panel today. So we're going to jump straight into it. Cara, I'd like to start with you in terms of your opening commentary. So Cora Jean Peterson is the CEO of the Phoenix Trust, appointed in 2022 at the age of 32 years old. So I think that is a great example. She's still youth considered, or was at the point of her appointment, according to certain organizations in the country. I, unfortunately, am no longer in that group and haven't been for quite some time. Cora Jean, thank you very much. She's a common fixture at our conferences, so thank you very much for your support. She was the first woman of color to lead the organization. She's dedicated to making tertiary education accessible to South African students, and overall, the Phoenix Trust has raised over 348 million and supported over 5,800 investment-worthy young minds. I think that is certainly worthy of an applause since inception in 2017. Cora Jean, for your introduction. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheldon. Okay, I'm too short to stand there, so I hope you don't mind. I'll be moving around a little bit. Sheldon also stole a little bit of my thunder to announce the numbers, but it's fine. We're actually on 6,000 students now after our recent disbursement. Thank you, thank you. So what Phoenix is and does and who we are. So the Phoenix Trust is a public benefit organization, and we're actually the first of its kind in South Africa. We are both specializing in tech-enabled platform that allows students to fundraise for themselves, as well as administering corporate bursaries. So over the years, we've now actually raised just about 350 million, supported over 6,000 students, and over the last 8 years, we've worked with over 400 corporate donors. 70 of them are currently active, because as you know, we have life cycles. This has not been an easy journey. I had a very traumatic 2023, and it was actually my first year as CEO as well. So we went from raising 48 million rand in 2022 to 14 million rand in 2023. 1-4. The world changed. So many of our corporate partners were going through a CSI refresh. They had paused their money, and internally, we were also going through almost a 45% staff turnover in an 18-month period. Had it not been for our team's sheer determination, commitment to our internal why, our organizational why, our personal values, and our belief in trusting the process around fundraising best practices, we wouldn't have bounced back. But bounce back we did. In 2 short years, we experienced an unprecedented 580% income growth, going from 14 million to last year we raised over 95 million rand for our students. And that is thanks to our amazing corporate partners who believed in us and chose to the keyword co-create. Now, I only have 2.5 short minutes left, so I want to share with you 2 things we needed to adapt to. We call them mindset traps, and this is what we needed to overcome in order to experience the grit and growth that I just told you about. The first one, very important. I'm doing good work, funding us should be a no-brainer. Get over yourself quickly. Donors owe you nothing. It is your responsibility to do the research. Do you align to their business goals, their impact strategy? Are you able to integrate into their employee giving programs to add to their cultural value add? Are you able to showcase through good governance, through accurate reporting, what your multiplier effect is? For example, we are able through our reporting to show our donors that for every 1 rand you invest in our operational funding, we will raise 3 rand for your students. So that impact is big. So what we were able to do was to better understand our donors, to meet them where they are at, to co-create solutions. And by doing that, you shift from being a beneficiary, which has its own power dynamics, to a valuable strategic partner. Second point, Fundraising is a standalone function. The debates my team had around the leadership table, I cannot tell you, because we had them struggling on whose voice matters more, students or donors, the money or who we're serving. And we had questions like, why are students asking for food stipends? Are they not grateful for the tuition funding? Or questions like, why is it that donors only want to fund A students? Do they not really understand the challenges on the ground? And the truth is, both perspectives mattered. And it was our responsibility to bring those parties together through understanding, kindness, and solutions. And so we put a plan together. Fundraising started traveling with programs to universities, and programs started traveling with fundraising to donor meetings. Because once they understood each other's stakeholders better, they could better champion each other when decisions were being made. And that was how we made that difference. I have to close, but I want to leave with this final thought. Well, two. The one is please invest in your people. Annually, we make sure that we upskill all of our team in fundraising best practices so we can live out a shared belief that everyone is a fundraiser. And the last question that I would like to ask everyone is, does the why of your organization still make you cry? If it doesn't, you need to look deeper, because the work we do here is hard. So at the very least, make sure it's worth it and that it still has your heart. Thank you.
Corrigine, it wasn't easy to introduce a new element if you're the last cohort, but you certainly have, about introducing the concept of heart into it. And I think a lot of us in the work that we do, either as corporates, as non-profits, it is about changing lives, whether it's at ECD level, whether it's at tertiary level, whether it's in the health space or housing. Those are lives that are being changed, and we shouldn't lose sight of that in the work that we ultimately do. I'd now like to introduce Lesimola Selepe. He's the Senior Manager for Youth, Education, and Women at MTN. Let me not get that wrong. Lesimola, like Lunga, has extensive experience on the other side of the development curtain. He has previously worked in the non-profit sector, focusing on the management of HIV and AIDS testing and counseling sites. He has almost a decade of experience in the corporate social investment sector. Lesimola, the mic is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Sheldon, maybe just to apologize to you. I didn't know that you'd use the same photo where I'm wearing the same outfit. So apologies to you and the colleagues. Yeah, look, I think on my side, as a point of departure, I think one basic fact is that as MTN, we are socially aware, we are conscious that as a business we are operating within a society that is plagued with so many socioeconomic challenges. Not only are we operating within that space, but it's within the very same dynamics that we are operating within. We are also profitable as a business within the very same environment that is plagued by high levels of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. So it is for this reason that as MTN, the foundation was established with a clear mandate to say that it would be irresponsible of us as a corporate, the growth that we've seen since the birth of MTN in 1994, to grow in leaps and bounds and today to be called a multinational and not contribute to the socioeconomic developmental agenda of the country. So because of that fact, it's an imperative for us that the foundation was established so that we can facilitate and be part of the developmental agenda. And the topic that we are discussing today around impact funding. So the mandate that is carried by MTN to drive that impact, to drive socioeconomic development, sits with us within the foundation. And I think it's important just to highlight that because as I earlier on mentioned that as much as we are driving socioeconomic development, the development of MTN or the development of society is closely linked to the development of the business as well. So meaning that the social welfare of society is our business, is our concern. Because if the society is developing and in a better position, so is the business as well. So the funds that have been put towards the foundation through the CSI Foundation, through the CSI budget, we carry the mandate around safeguarding it in terms of impact funding. So one, it's important for us to understand that the budget that sits with us as a foundation, we need to be intentional around it. Intentional in a sense that we are carrying that mandate of driving socioeconomic development, so there needs to be intentionality around it. Number two, if we are to drive funding that is impactful, besides being intentional around it, we need to make sure that the funding itself is measurable. So if we talk about intentionality, as CSI practitioners, it's very important for us to develop a framework around the funds. So the funds, what I'm talking about, one, we need to make sure that the funds that have been bestowed upon us as a foundation or as CSI practitioners, we need to make sure that it is strategically aligned to the business. As a business, we believe that everyone deserves the benefits of a modern, connected life. That's what MTN believes. So this gives us a strategic imperative to make sure that the budget that sits within the foundation creates shared value, so that when we put our foot forward as a business in driving socioeconomic development, we are doing so putting our core competency as a business first. Again, we need to develop focus areas in us being intentional around the funds that are bestowed upon us for impactful funding. I spoke also about we need to be measurable. The funds need to be measured. So what I'm talking about here, we need to make sure that outcomes are clear. We need to make sure that strong M&E is in place. We also need to make sure that reporting becomes a part of us when we deliver from an impact and funding perspective. Thank you.
Cara, Jean, let's start with you, because you know that's the heart messaging is there. How do you get that across in your interaction, whether it be, especially at the beginning of initiating an interaction with funders, be it corporate, philanthropy, and the like? How do you get that heart across?
There's this book written by Alan Clayton called The Great Fundraising Organizations. And one of the things that he speaks about is the truth well told. He speaks about you need everyone in your team to be able to perfect that pitch. How do you tell the real, authentic story of what you do and who you serve while highlighting the problem with dignity, showcasing a possible solution, but still showcasing a need? And the way that we got our team to do that is we recruited based on purpose and values alignment. It's already embedded in them. Many of them have real lived experiences of not being able to afford education and why what we do is so important. So they speak from the heart, from a lived experience, and through our engagement with our students. So having those touch points, being able to represent well, but being able to represent authentically, it conveys. Because we know when someone's speaking BS. And we know when someone's being fake about it, or they're just kind of saying what was written as a script for them. I'm not going to connect with that. So we take what would we connect with, what do we connect with, and we share that with our potential partners. And the ones who are valued aligned to you, you'll end up getting to do amazing things together. And the ones that don't, thank you for your time.
Now, Les, there was something that you said in terms of which was quite stark, where you say, you know, you as MTN realize that you are a part of a society, in this instance, South Africa. You realize the realities of South Africa that we face, the developmental issues, and you mentioned that you're profitable in that society. And often we think of it as an either-or. Either-or, we have a profit mandate or imperative, or we, you know, build our CSI. And we know in South Africa it has to be an and. If you know, some organizations may not see it as an and, but it has to be an and you've clearly seen it as an and. How do you marry those two? Because I mean, we're taught in business that it's either or, right? Strategies of either or, of making choices. But clearly those two choices sit together.
Yeah. Look, I think one of the earlier speakers spoke about the soul, right? So I think one for me, you know, I think it just shows intentionality from MTN. Clear, decisive to say that, look, you can't divorce yourself as a business from what's happening within society. So our, you know, almost future-proofing the business depends on the welfare of the society and the customers that you are serving. So if the society, the clients are profitable, are economically active, then that means it's a positive outcome for the business as well, because it means we can continue to operate and transact with our customers per se. But I think in the same breath as well, being strategic around CSI, in terms of strategic CSI, to some extent, the business can also derive value from that, because we are leveraging the core competence of the business, you know, working on, you know, pulling the strings of our customers, the society, in terms of us being a good corporate citizen, but also using our core competence, which is innovation, technology, and connectivity for good, which also can translate to a shared benefit. So it is an imperative, and we can't divorce one from the other.
Before we go on to the next question, I'd just like us to launch the final poll for this session for you to consider as we go through the remaining questions. So the poll is, after today's conversation, what do you think is the single biggest barrier to corporate non-profit partnerships achieving lasting impact? So it would be great to get your thoughts on that. Let me turn to some of the questions that have been posed in the chat. So Warren Forer asks, and I suppose the first part of his question is self-explanable, because it describes the current situation for many non-profits. Warren starts with his question and says, if the treatment of non-profits is shaped by those who are holding the purse strings, who truly holds power in CSI partnerships? And obviously the purse string holder there. But the question continues and says, and how can systems change occur while that power remains unexamined? So I think the question, and possibly to build on from yesterday's conversation about funding ecosystems, for an ecosystem to work, how does the power imbalance change there? How does MTN view it? Les, I'll start with you in terms of how do we change the power dynamics for the ecosystem really to thrive?
I think the point of departure is really around acknowledging that, socioeconomic development or development in itself is quite complex. And you can't streamline interventions. You can't have a one solution that fits all and addresses all. So that if you do have that lens towards socioeconomic development, then you are fully aware that your interventions have limitations. You can't be everything to everyone. That's why we embrace the partnerships model. So I think for me, from that point of view, it becomes evident that there shouldn't be power dynamics. I need the partner as much as they need me. I mean, even if you look at the key pillars around the UN SDGs, one of them speaks around flexibility. We need to be flexible as partners. We need to be flexible while we are implementing. We need to be able to take feedback from those that we are working with, even if it's your NPOs and your civil society. So we always have to be open, transparent, and accountable to one another, because no one corporate, the MTN Foundation, can't do it alone. So it needs to be approached in that sense.
Okay. Cara Jean, yeah?
Yeah. Before you move on, I actually really want to weigh in on this conversation around power dynamics. And I want to take the opportunity to give a very big shout out to two of our major donors, which is FirstRand and ABSA, with their strategy in this dynamic. So what they actually started doing is, and I hope that this is an example to some of our other donors, what they started doing was that they created partnership workshops where all of their different partners were invited, and we were able to have safe, open, honest conversations about what our challenges are, what's going right, what's going wrong. Not only did we form an ecosystem where we learned from other partners in the ecosystem and what was shared learnings, shared challenges, we could co-create solutions across the board of impact, but also they went further. We went into one-on-one sessions. There was anonymous survey sent out, and I think it removed the fear of, if I don't give positive feedback, my funding is at risk. And instead, they took that step to say, your voice matters, and we are willing to co-create with you. We are each able to put our hand up and say, this is what we could do better, because it's not personal. We have a shared impact strategy. So I think to give tangible examples of how to protect against that power dynamic, those for me were strategies that have been working.
That's and really, it's great to see that there are those practical examples, because then it's not just spoken about theoretically. It's there are organizations who are committing to it and rolling it out, and then obviously seeing the benefits of that. Cara Jean, I want to stay with you, and I'm going to draw the thinking of Warren's question, even if it's not in its strictest sense. So Warren has asked another question, and I think it's more from the corporate short-termism that I alluded to earlier, but can easily go into the long, how the focus of non-profits. So how do you balance your short-term commitment? So specifically some of the ones you touched on. You've got a student who is hungry now. You've got a student who doesn't have food now. They can't concentrate when they are in class now, right? Balancing off those short-term needs with the long-term impact that you are trying to build as an organization.
So I think one of the things that's really benefited us is our commitment to making informed decisions. So on an annual basis, we do a survey with all of our students, current and past, in terms of what were the challenges that kept them in survival mode versus what enabled them to thrive. So in our day-to-day engagements with our donors, we bring that data forward. So it's not reactive. We are picking up trends. before mental health was something on the agenda for bursaries, we picked it up back in 2020 because we were doing a survey and data collection during COVID. We were able to say 45% of our students are struggling with their mental health and have no resources. And we were able to take that, go to our donors and say who is able to help with a quick fix through different vouchers or quick sponsored, and who wants to have long-term conversations. You, at the end of the day, with fundraising, you are filling a bucket with holes. You can't ever just be in retention mode, and long-term building, you also need to be in acquisition mode. So while we were getting new partnerships, we were also building long-term strategies with our partners that were willing to kind of stay 3, 5, 10 years with us. We're only 8 years old, so we'll have our first 10-year donor by the end of next year. So yeah, I think for us that was really the balance we needed to strike. But being able to proactively go to those supporting us and say, this is really what our students need, both now and for the future, because no one wants to act in crisis mode, and in the sector it feels like that's the day-to-day.
That's the day-to-day. Les, I want to leave you. I know we've run out of our time and we've got the lights flashing, but I want to ask that of you. You know, in terms of from the corporate perspective, you've got the long-term commitment, which, you know, we know is needed to have real impact. But you do have the short-term commitment now. So you can say, well, you know, you're going to see the outcomes of a child's ECD investment in 10, 15, 20 years. But there are certain imperatives based on the nature of our country where people need things now, and that short-term thing. So there's that element. There's also the reporting element where, you know, you need to show how the money is being invested, how it's being spent. How do you balance those two in terms of the short-term commitments and then the ability to commit to long-term goals?
Yeah, I think it goes back to having an honest conversation with yourself about the kind of work that we do and the nature of the work that we do. My earlier statement around socioeconomic development or development itself, it's quite complex. And there's no one size fits all. So for example, on our side, like I said, I mean, strategically, we are driving strategic CSI, leveraging the core competence. So our focus, whether it's in education, it's in youth and women advancement, it's in arts and culture and the likes, the common thread is the use of technology for strategic purposes. But you can't ignore that sometimes when you are on the ground, we are delivering tablets in the name of driving access and inclusion towards quality education. Of course, we have to focus on marginalized communities, previously disadvantaged. You are talking about bridging the digital divide, which pushes us to go to your deep, remote, rural areas that are characterized by high levels of poverty and unemployment. So you find yourself going to such communities with devices, yes, with strategy and thinking behind it, but you find that the very same beneficiary you are trying to support does not have shoes, does not have school uniform and the likes. And what do you do in such a situation? For me, it goes back to what I said. There's no one size fits all. You have to be flexible. Okay. So we need to be proactive while we are chasing strategic, long-term, sustainable outcomes. We can't ignore your immediate returns. And the earlier point, addressing one issue speaks to the other. Unlocking one issue, unlocking the issues of a learner who doesn't have school shoes, a learner who doesn't have food, unlocks their learning outcomes in a classroom through the digital device. So you can't ignore one or the other. And maybe if I can give just shortly a practical example. And we've had a situation where we run upskilling of unemployed youth on digital skills. Yes, in the boardroom, we are lining into strategy. We need to drive inclusion, access, demand-led digital skills. We need to go to the marginalized communities. Came with a fully packaged program, but on the ground, you find that we made a mistake and forgot that something as simple as catering is an imperative We were open to hearing feedback from our training partners to say, look, the training is happening, but the issue of catering, making sure that there's food while the unemployed youth are being upskilled, is quite a critical one. We were flexible enough. We took it to the funding committee to say, look, strategically, yes, this might not be a focus, but this is how it's affecting the long-term impact that you are trying to achieve. And we're quickly able to, make the adjustments to meet the immediate needs for the sake of the long-term outcomes.
Lesimola, Cora Jean, thank you very much for your insights, those practical examples. I think that flexibility is key. Thank you to all of you for voting. I see the short-term imperatives, impacting on the long-term funding is certainly one that's come through strongly from that panel. To my panelists and those who came before them, thank you very much. We really thank you for your insights. Let's give them a round of applause.